welcome to A Billion Ideas. With me, Maria Shakil. As the presidential polls draw closer, political parties have been announcing their support for the two camps. On one side is the NDA's pick, Draupadi Murmu, who is clearly the president in waiting, and on the other side is the opposition's pick, Yashwant Sinha. Even though the political divide continues, Draupadi Murmu's candidature is historic. She is set to be the first tribal woman to be the president of India and the first Odia to really rise to the top constitutional office of the country. She served as the governor of Jharkhand from 2015 to 2021 and is an icon of the Indian fairy tale of rising from the bottom ranks to the top through sheer grit and determination. After her candidature, Prime Minister Modi said that millions of people who have faced hardships in life derive strength from the life of Draupadi Murmu and added she will make a great president. He also said her understanding of policy matters and compassionate nature will greatly benefit our country. There are great political calculations behind Murmu's candidature, but the historic weight of the elections cannot be ignored. The big question we ask today is, by simply opposing her on political grounds, is the opposition camp on the wrong side of history? On 21st, India will be getting its first tribal president and the second woman president. Can politicians and political parties afford to be on the wrong side of the history? Joining me on the show, Radhika Ramaseshan, columnist, Varun Singh, political analyst, Sanjay Kumar, professor of CSDS, and we also have Professor Kapil Kumar, historian of IGNOU. I'm going to begin with a woman on the panel. India will be getting its second woman president, Radhika Ramaseshan. Whatever said and done, would you say that knowing fully well that Yashwant Sinha is up against someone who has the numbers clearly stacked up for her, should political parties who are relatively not signaling which side they are on make the right pick and back Draupadi Murmu?
Well, truly, the Draupadi Murmu's candidacy has thrown the opposition into a complete mess. You know, it has completely befuddled the opposition, and you have already seen the JMM coming out of it, of the UPA. Now, the JMM really had no choice. I mean, yes. Draupadi Murmu is an Adivasi, a woman to boot, and of course, I mean, she comes from a very, she comes from a not so well-off background.
Yes. And
here she is, I mean, politically empowered and ready to take the post of the president if all goes well. I'm not going to second guess anything.
Yes.
But so JMM has come out. Mamata Banerjee, who initiated the entire exercise to put up an opposition candidate, is herself in a bit of a tizzy. I mean, she went to the extent of saying that had we known the NDA was putting up an Adivasi as its candidate, then we might have reconsidered our own strategy. Yashwant Sinha, to start with, never really stood a chance against Draupadi Murmu. I'm not only talking about numbers. Numbers are stacked in favor of the NDA, but what does he represent? I mean,
yes.
For the life of me, I couldn't think of what
Radhika, he if anything represents the fact that he is a former BJP leader. How do we forget that? So for all those who are talking about the evil philosophy of the BJP, they cannot have a selective interpretation of the fact that Yashwant Sinha has been a BJP leader all his life, for most part of his life. Varun Singh, we are seeing emergence of new political axis, as has been the case of most presidential elections. There have been breaking of ranks. Look at the TDP. Look at the case of Uddhav Thackeray. Of course, his MLAs and MPs forced him to take that call. But again, JMM, they had no option but to back Draupadi Murmu. This is clearly, I would not even say catch-22 situation for them. They understand fully well that this is a case of a tribal president of India, and these are the parties who are in many ways reach out to the tribals. Maharashtra also has a significant tribal population.
Absolutely. It makes me feel very happy because a woman going and climbing up the ladder and assuming that post, and especially a woman like Draupadi Murmu, whose history is so difficult. Yes. She comes from and I wouldn't mind saying this word, but she comes from a very poor background. She studied, completed her graduation in spite of, coming from a community where you haven't seen so much of education. And she went on to become a clerk, then a teacher, then a minister in Orissa. And let me remind you a small thing. There was an instance where her own party government, when she was the governor in Jharkhand, she stalled two of their bills yes. that she felt were anti-Adivasis. And even made the central government realize it, and then they had to be backed out. So if anyone who says that she comes from a background who wouldn't even understand how the parliament or how the constitution or any other administrative post functions would be completely wrong. And, all those people who tried to pull her down, they were not trying to pull her down because she was an Adivasi. They were trying to pull her down just because she is a woman. And whenever I see these men who actually come from a background who do not want women to climb up, they come up with such statements about evil philosophy or whatever. It could be, as you rightly pointed out, the same philosophies of Yashwant Sinha. He himself was a minister, not just a leader. He represented the entire government. And that philosophy, if it is not on Yashwant Sinha, how can it be on a woman who comes from a community which has never been represented?
Varun, you're interestingly highlighting the woman aspect of this candidature. I'm going to talk about the woman aspect with Radhika in just a bit. But before that, Professor Kapil Kumar, this is history in making, and we are witnessing history unfold. What will you tell all those political parties who are continuing to back Yashwant Sinha? They say that they have to put up a symbolic fight, even if it is tokenism. Just look at the way BJP, when they were in opposition, they did not back the candidature of Mr. Narayanan. They did not back a similar candidate in the past.
You see, I have lost your voice, but I hope you are hearing me.
Yes, Professor Kumar, go ahead.
You see, the thing is this, you look at it, who's leading it, Congress. Now, Congress has a history, right from the freedom struggle days, of not giving any tribal leader any position in its organizational hierarchy. They oppose the tribal movements, whether you pick up Birsa Munda, whether you pick up Santhan uprisings, whether you pick up Sitaram Raju during the freedom struggle. And once these leaders gave their lives fighting the British, the Congress will go and make them their heroes. That's what they tried to do all their life. Then look at the second part after 47. All these regions in the country, what was their developmental stage? I'll quote here Professor S.C. Dubey. I think it was the fourth plan when he was invited to make the fourth plan for the tribals. And he asked them to give them where the money is spent, under which heads. So the heads were given. And then he was asked, tell me, with these heads, how the money is spent. And will you believe that 80% of the money going for tribal welfare was going to build the houses and buy jeeps for the government officials. And Professor Dubey at that time refused that I can't sign this kind of a plan paper. And he was told, nahi, deri ho gayi hai, ye kar dijiye, wo kar dijiye, that kind of a thing. Now, if you look at the contribution of tribals, whether it is 1857, Tatya Tope in Panchmahal with the Bhils, whether it's the uprisings in Jharkhand, Bihar, you come to 43, 44, the role which played by Kukis, the Nagas, in Azad Hind Fauj. Did we, and what we did? We tried to keep tribals as saying they should be brought into the mainstream.
Yes. Without mainstreaming them.
Every Indian citizen and every Indian citizen and every Indian region is mainstream. Why do you differentiate this? That this is periphery and this is mainstream. I'll give you one more example. In 1946 December, the session of Congress was held in Meerut.
Okay.
And the Nagaland representative there said that in Nagaland, certain American missionaries are preaching that Nagas should not join the Indian Union. The Congress must do something. And you know what was the answer of Nehru? It's on record. Freedom struggle of India will not start from Nagaland. You look at the Chakmas, which went to Bangladesh. The entire region of Chakmas wanted to join India. Congress conceded it. You look at the role of Gujars in the wars of 65 and 71.
That you have recalled so many instances in history. Let me bring in Sanjay Kumar as well. Sanjay Kumar, I'm looking at the numbers. This is clearly an outreach to the strong 10.42 scheduled tribes population of India. 10.42 crore scheduled tribes population, which are spread across many states. But of course, as we have seen, and all political parties do that, this is about political dividends as well, electoral dividends as well. The BJP certainly is hoping that of the 4 states that will go to polls in the next 1.5 years, which includes Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat and Chhattisgarh, where it is 128 seats reserved for scheduled tribes, the BJP had won just 35 in the last assembly elections. Do you think it will benefit them electorally as well?
One can imagine that such a move of the BJP is going to help BJP in mobilizing the tribal vote in its favor. But Maria, one should also note that tribal vote has already shifted in favor of BJP in a big way. If we look at the Lok Sabha elections and look at the 2014 and 2019 Lok Sabha elections, in 2019 elections, nationally 44% of the tribal vote went to BJP. Prior to 2014, it used to be in the range of 20-22%. So BJP's support base among the tribal vote nationally for the national election has doubled. It's almost reached 50%, 44-45%. If we look at the state assembly election, yes, BJP doesn't manage to mobilize as many tribal votes as it manages for the Lok Sabha election, but still it is a sizable number of votes which BJP has been getting among the tribals. But I still believe that such a move of BJP is going to help BJP in consolidating its tribal support base, especially for the state assembly election. You rightly mentioned 4 states goes to poll. All these states have a very sizable number of tribal voters. And I think BJP is certainly eyeing on the tribal votes for these state assembly election as well as for the big election which takes place in 2024.
And Sanjay Kumar, historically speaking, the tribals have largely been with the Congress. The shift of the tribals happened towards Prime Minister Modi per se. It was the Modi voter that emerged, keeping in mind welfareism. If that welfareism card is working on ground, what does this mainstreaming, because BJP is saying that this is visible mainstreaming of the tribals with the top constitutional office, which will be occupied by a tribal woman, someone who has risen in the ranks, someone who understands what does poverty mean. She is coming from the Santhal community. So she has that understanding, and hence the policies of the government will also be seen, in that direction. So if the welfareism vote has already moved, what does this symbolism mean?
No, I think this symbolism, what does it bring about?
Yes.
Once we have a tribal woman as the president of this country, I think I can already see that there is an enthusiasm among the tribals of at least in the North India Hindi heartland, getting a sense that we are going to have a first tribal women president of this country. So a connect, people will start feeling a connect. And I think if this connect, this feeling of being connected or being having a person at the top position of this country, I think that's going to make a huge impact in the morale of the tribal. If some of them have feeling that they are not in the mainstream, which I don't believe, I think a lot of them still believe that they are in the mainstream of the country. I don't see a sense of alienation among them. But if there is some sense of alienation among them, I think a lot of that alienation is going to go away with this symbolism which BJP has, used for putting up a tribal women as the presidential candidate.
Okay. Radhika, two battles, 2017 and 2022, and I'm looking at these two battles. Ramnath Kovind, again, someone who has risen in the ranks, comes from a very, very humble background. Someone comes, he's of course a Dalit president, and versus Meera Kumar, who has a particular background, comes from a family. The BJP would say that this is a dynasty politics at play. The other one, this battle that we are seeing, Yashwant Sinha versus someone again coming from a very humble background. Do you think the BJP, when it projects this symbolism of its candidature, women, tribal, but also someone who understands what a huge population of this country goes through on a daily basis, that struggle for life, that struggle for survival?
Yeah, certainly, her life story, her rise in politics, in the BJP, I mean, it's really been a hard luck story for her.
Yes.
She lost her son, she lost her husband. I mean, it's not been smooth sailing at all for her. And she has achieved quite a bit on her own. I mean, let's not take that away from her. That narrative, yes, it is moving. It will resonate with the tribals and also the underempowered sections, not just the Adivasis. So to that extent, yes, she is going to have an impact. However, since she holds the office of the president, she obviously cannot campaign in any of the elections, just like Mr. Kovind could not. Yes. Of course, Ramnath Kovindji did address a couple of meetings and public functions in Uttar Pradesh. And if I were to say that, did he have an impact on the Dalit votes? Did the Dalit votes necessarily come to the BJP because of Ramnath Kovind? But he was one of the inputs. If the Dalit votes did come to the BJP, did gravitate towards the BJP in the Hindi heartland, it was also because of very hard work that the BJP has done on the ground in terms of getting sections of which were not with the party, and also in terms of living down its image as a party of, as an urban party of the well-off. So similarly here, it just depends upon how the narrative travels across the country. You have rightly spoken about the states that go to polls and the sizable tribal population that all of them contain. So together with Draupadi Murmu's projection, the BJP will also have to do a lot of work on the ground in Gujarat. Gujarat is the first election that is coming, and there the Adivasi vote has tended to go with the Congress, at least in the assembly elections. So I think the BJP will have to work very hard on these sections. And yes, I mean, if you see the recent inductees into the BJP in Gujarat, there are some important tribal leaders who have come into the party from the Congress. So the BJP is acutely aware of the fact that it needs to work much more on its Adivasi base in Gujarat, and it is doing that, working towards that end. And similarly, I think it will also work in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh.
Okay.
So Draupadi Murmu, I would say, is one strand in the overall
messaging of the BJP.
To win over the Adivasis.
Yes, and also a messaging which begins in 2014, where the BJP is out there to send a message that they are not a Hindi belt party. This is a party which is looking at expanding its footprints. And if anything, as far as this candidature is concerned, the first Udiya to be the president on 21st, potentially, again, I would say. Professor Kapil Kumar, what would you tell the Congress party, which says that they have also in the past chosen presidents who have been high on symbolism, so they have also done firsts. So this is, if anything, in addition to those list of firsts.
See, I will like to say here, I will like to look at it in a broader spectrum, I will not look at it from the vote politics that a political party will gain votes out of it or not and all. I am looking at it from a national perspective point of view, that those who were kept as marginalized, who were kept as debunked, oh, you have to join the mainstream and learn to be in the mainstream, they are going to head the republic. I am going to put it in a broader spectrum, that the development for years and years which didn't took place in these areas of tribal areas.
Yes.
You look at it, what is the development now taking place in those areas? So that is the kind of thing, a nation building, which this nation wants. And I am very sure now that not only the urban youth and rural youth, but the youth coming from the tribal. You see, I feel very uncomfortable when I use the word tribal. I will better call them Aranyavasi, because Janjati is a total stupid translation of the word tribal, which is used in Hindi for that. That this youth is now today realizing that the more country develops, the more their individual career develops. That link which has been established. You see, earlier people will go to America only to see that they have their career. Now, the mental outlook which has changed. Okay, it is, yes, if India is at prestige in the university, in the world, then only my job is prestigious in America. Otherwise, I will look down. So that linkage which has come between nationalism and the youth of the country in various parts of the country under this broad spectrum. So those who are not empowered, they are feeling empowered today. And I look at it as a point of view of empowering not only just a woman or a lady, but the hundreds of tribes in this country who have contributed heavily in nation building, who have fought with the British, who have struggled for the freedom but were kept marginalized. So today they are seeing a development, and so is coming the political development in these areas. So it is a welcome sign, and the Congress has missed the bus again here,
The Congress has missed the bus, you're saying.
What they should do.
Okay, Varun Singh, you
Yes.
think the same?
Yes,
Do you think the
absolutely.
same, that Congress has missed the bus? The opposition parties who are all opposing Draupadi Murmu, have they missed the bus, or will you say that opposition parties always put up a presidential nominee? You may like it, or even if they know that the numbers are not there, this is an important fight which has to be undertaken. It is a fight which must be fought.
See, it is a fight that they have to fight.
Yes.
It is a battle that they have to fight. There is nothing that an opposition party can do. You cannot give a direct no election to any party in government, or else, the biggest thing to keep your workers active is to contest elections. It may be any election. So they had to put in candidate, but they were taken by surprise when they saw that someone like Draupadi Murmu has been put up by NDA, correctly pointed out by Radhika, that when Mamata Banerjee realized that Adivasi, a tribal, hasn't put up as a candidate, she herself was taken aback. But I just wanted to say a small thing. I don't see it as a symbolism. I think Draupadi Murmu is a candidature that deserves the post. And as rightly pointed out, Ramnath Kovind didn't do much to bring in the Dalit votes, because the BJP now doesn't want to just do symbolism. They want to bring out those actual people who are marginalized, who people would feel that they cannot be, brought to this post. Look at her past. She joined the BJP in Orissa at that time when BJP as a institution or
as a political party had no foothold there.
Absolutely. At that point of time, she joined it. And now, when she's elevated to the post of president, look at it, such a beautiful message to all the loyalists. Even in the Congress, I would say all those Congress loyalists who are still stuck with the party when it is going down or not in its very beautiful phase. If those people who have stuck with their party, it is a message to all the political parties across the country that be loyal to the party. Don't just jump the boat.
Or maybe
stay with
you'll
the party
become
and
you'll
will be
become
rewarded when it
president
comes
one
up.
day. 30 seconds for Radhika.
Yeah, Maria, all I want to quickly say is that while it's a significant move in bridging the gap between the subaltern and the mainstream, between mainstreaming the subaltern, we must also take cognizance of one important fact, that the far left uprisings, the Naxalite or the Maoist groups, have been very active only in the tribal pockets of India, whichever state they're active in, and they have been recruiting their cadres from among the tribals. So we have to ask, why does this happen? Does the government need to invest more in the Adivasi-dominated areas in terms of development and in terms of infrastructure building, and more importantly, employment, education,
right.
health, sanitation, and so on. If mainstreaming is really to be
Just
taken
look
to
at
its
that visual.
logical conclusion.
She is standing tall and she's standing among the men, and just look at that visual, because she will be the next president of India. Really appreciate your time, Radhika Ramaseshan, Varun Singh, Sanjay Kumar, and Professor Kapil Kumar. That's all from me. I'll be seeing you next Saturday with another episode of A Billion Ideas.